Welcome again to this HTA online course, and this is now the video 11, and this is the last video of this self-learning course that will provide some description of current and future trends in the field of HTA, of health technology assessment. Health technology assessment and economic evaluation is a field of research evolving quite fast in terms of method use, but also in terms of process. How authorities are just assessing health technology. In this short presentation, I will briefly explain 5 themes, 5 new developments in the field of health technology assessment. And that will be the industry engagement and involvement, real-world data and evidence, patient, career and citizen involvement, incorporating patient and career preference, and emerging element of value. Just also to let you know that this is not an exhaustive list of all of the future and all of the future trends of HTA, but it's just discussing some of the themes that were also discussed in a report by The Economist that is available in the course material. And the first theme is the industry engagement and involvement. We really observe since recently that there are different steps being taken to enhance industry engagement and involvement to increase efficiency of HTA. The industry was always key in the healthcare decision-making process, and they provide submission to the authorities with evidence on the clinical effectiveness and on the cost effectiveness. But we see a trend to have more policy discussion also with the industry. For example, the NICE in the UK provide new consultation opportunities to really discuss more regularly with the authorities and the industry to also have a better match between what is expected from the authorities and what the industry could provide. In the same line, we also see early dialogues between industry and the authorities, that they really are on the table really early in the process of developing a new drug to really have a better discussion about what could be expected and the type of information that will be collected. And the aim of this increasing industry engagement and involvement is to increase the efficiency of the HTA agency, to not arrive at a point, by example, that there is not enough data to make a clear decision. And we see it seems successful engagement and involvement, and both agency and industry see this engagement as something positive that will become even more important in the future. Another theme becoming also really important is real-world data and evidence. Real-world data are data from administrative data set, case notes, surveys, registries, social media, electronic health record, and many other sources. And they are becoming more and more commonly used and being collected. We are really speaking of big data in our world, and that will really be the future. And such type of data could really provide important data for the payer and could really complement data that we get from randomized controlled trial. Since data from the randomized controlled trial provide efficacy data, and real-world data could provide effectiveness data and could just validate the outcome we get in a randomized controlled trial. And we see that such data could potentially be used in the future to inform deliberation on the value of new health technologies. Since a few years, managed entry agreements have been commonly used in some disease, like in the field of oncology, for really expensive drug. And such managed entry agreement mean that the authority and the industry are willing to share the risk. That, by example, a drug could become available on the market even with limited evidence, but then additional data, real-world data, will be collected. And if the drug is not working quite well, the industry will not receive the reimbursement from the authorities. There are different types of managed entry agreement. Another example is the coverage with evidence development. In coverage with evidence development, the industry receives a reimbursement for a period of time, for example, 1 or 2 years, and during this period, additional real-world data needs to be collected by the industry, and after this period of time, 1 to 2 years, a revision of the decision to reimburse the drugs will be done by the authorities. And maybe it will be a full reimbursement, or maybe it will be stopped. Then we really see some interest of collecting real-world data for that purpose. There were, however, some challenges with collecting real-world data. First, regarding the quality and the acceptability of real-world data. Not all real-world data are of good quality. The governance and accountability of real-world data is another challenge. Who will be responsible to collect and to share all of this data? Transferability of the evidence could also be uncertain. Maybe real-world data in one country could not really be transferred in another country because maybe the settings are quite different, and thus the effect or the effectiveness of the real-world data will not be the same between countries. And thus, how to use real-world evidence to inform decision-making is a key point of attention in the future and a key point of consideration to we really need to have a better understanding how real-world evidence could really inform decision-making. And we see then some ongoing efforts by HTA agency to consider more systematically the scope and the use of real-world data and evidence to be used as part of their work. And we really see this trend that is expected to even become more important in the future. The next theme is patient, career, and citizen involvement. We really see a desire to increase patient involvement, and probably in two ways. The first way is into their experience, preference, and perspective. Also in decision taken by the European Medicine Agency or by national HTA agency, we see that patients are nowadays also invited to be at the table, to give their opinion, to share their experience. That's something, a kind of trend that we observe to really involve patients, often by the means of patient organization, around the table to really, that they have really a voice in the healthcare decision making. And another way to increase patient involvement is to generate some evidence regarding patient preferences and patient experience with preference research that could be involved in the dossier for the HTA agency. And the patient perspective is nowadays becoming increasingly important in healthcare decision, but also in HTA, because the patient is the key actor. The patient should be involved at all of the stages when developing, but also when assessing an health technology. And on this slide, you see some application where a patient could be interested in the medicine research and development. For example, from setting up some research priorities to the design of a protocol or the protocol synopsis that's more in the research design and planning phase, but also in the research conduct and operation to help to prepare information to the trial participant, also for the data monitoring committee, but also for the dissemination, communication, and post-approval. For example, patients have also a role in regulatory affairs, but also in health technology assessment or in post-study communication. Then we see an increasing interest to involve patients, and there are a lot of possibilities to involve patients, and all of these are complementary. We should really try to involve patients at different stages in the research and development, but also in the approval and healthcare decision making. In line with this theme to involve more patients, the theme 4 is really to incorporate patient and career preferences and value. We know that patients choose medical products based on their preference, so they are adherent to a specific medication because they are satisfied and because maybe they have a preference for this type of drug. And we define patient preferences as a mental process that patients use to compare and choose one drug over another by comparing the good and the bad. And knowing patient preferences is something that could be important for clinical decision making. If you know what a patient prefers, the doctor could identify a best treatment for this patient. And thus, knowing and getting insight into patient preference could help the health professional to improve disease management and could facilitate a shared decision-making process becoming increasingly important nowadays with the patient-centered model, and could also lead then to improve medication adherence. Insight into patient preferences can also be really important for policy decision-making. It could help to design healthcare intervention that really fits with the needs and the preferences of patients. It can also be interesting to assess the benefit-risk of healthcare intervention. If we have different attributes or different characteristics or different effects of a drug that could be important, knowing what is really important for the patient could help the authorities to make a good choice and a good value, a good benefit-risk ratio of the medicine. And thus we also see in reimbursement decision that preference could become and is becoming more important to assess the value of healthcare intervention. There was a large EU-funded project, the EMI Prefer project, that also aimed to provide some recommendations where preference research could be important in the medical product life cycle. And you see on this slide a lot of opportunities from the discovery that the patient could help to identify the unmet medical and assessment or the disease familiarization, but also to the clinical development to identify the endpoints of interest, to help for the benefit risk assessment, also for the marketing then authorization, and potentially for the HTA and reimbursement to also take the preference into account alongside cost effectiveness and other criteria that are used by decision makers. Some key message also regarding this view, there were some efforts to capture quantitatively the preference of patients. To measure the preference, we have qualitative method when we just interview some patient, individual interview or focus groups, or we have also quantitative method like stated preference method. And the use, for example, of this Squid-Chow experiment has really increased in recent years to collect data about the most important characteristics for patients. We still observe a limited use of quantitative patient preference studies in health technology assessment, but we see an increasing interest that different organizations like the NICE in the UK are open also to receive quantitative patient preference studies to inform about the value of a new medicine or a new health technology. The challenge remains to find the best way to integrate patient preferences into decision making. That can also be the future to really identify where and how to use this preference research in the decision-making process, and also to have a better interaction between the authorities and the researcher that conduct the research. The last theme for today is emerging element of value. Traditionally, we mainly focus on the cost and the effectiveness. This is what we are doing in an economic evaluation. But some people argue that it is maybe a too narrow perspective. And that's why also economic evaluation has received some criticism within HTA, that we also need to have other aspects that are important to measure and to take into account. And this is also especially true with the COVID-19, that there were other criteria that could be important for patients, like the fear of contagion or adherence improving factor. And this is also in line with the new trends of having more value-based healthcare. We need healthcare with a good value. And on the next slide, you just see one example of the element of value from a framework of the eSport society. And you see that we have the quality and the cost, part of the cost effectiveness, but there are other criteria, the more societal perspective with the productivity, adherence improving factor as well, and then some other criteria that could be important. And the importance could depend on the type of intervention and include, by example, the fear of contagion, the severity of the disease, the value of hope, the real option value, the equity, or other consideration. That for payers, there may be a lot of dimensions that are becoming important, and we also see a kind of development to also incorporate a lot of elements of value that could be important to really make a good informed decision making. On this slide, you could see some references of this lecture. On behalf of all of the speakers today, I would like to thank you for watching the course. We hope that you enjoy your learning process and that you enjoy learning about health technology assessment and economic evaluation. And you can, of course, continue your own learning by reading the course material and doing some of the exercise, or by reading some of the literature. And we thank you again for listening.